The film opens in 1943, with an intense aerial combat sequence. Louis Zamperini, a bombardier in the U.S. Army Air Corps, and his crew are engaged in a dangerous dogfight against Japanese fighters. The chaos of war is immediate. Bullets tear through the aircraft. The crew struggles to stay alive, and their plane barely makes it back to base. As the smoke clears, the story flashes back to Louis' childhood in Torrance, California. A rebellious and troublemaking kid, he often gets into fights and runs from authority figures. His older brother Pete, John DeLeo as young Pete, Alex Russell as the older Pete, sees potential in him and encourages him to channel his energy into running. Pete's tough love and mentorship push Louis to train, and soon he becomes an exceptional runner. Louis' talent blossoms, leading him to compete in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Though he doesn't win, his astonishing final lap earns admiration, including from Adolf Hitler himself. As war looms, Louis' Olympic dreams are put on hold when he enlists in the military. The flashback ends, returning to the present, where Louis and his crew are about to embark on a reconnaissance mission that will change his life forever. Louis and his crew are sent on a mission aboard a damaged B-24 bomber named the Green Hornet. Mid-flight over the Pacific, the aircraft malfunctions, sending the crew into a catastrophic crash. The impact is brutal, and as the plane shatters upon hitting the water, many of Louis' comrades perish. Louis, Phil, Domhnall Gleeson, and Mac Finn Whitrock manage to climb aboard two small life rafts, stranded in the vast open ocean. With little food, no fresh water, and the relentless sun beating down on them, survival seems impossible. Days stretch into weeks, and their struggle intensifies. They ration what little supplies they have and capture rainwater to stay hydrated. Tensions rise when Mac, overcome with fear, secretly eats the remaining rations. The ordeal takes its toll, but Louis remains determined, using his endurance and willpower to keep hope alive. They battle not only hunger but also the elements, scorching heat during the day, freezing cold at night, and relentless shark attacks that test their resilience. On the 33rd day, their suffering reaches a new level when a Japanese bomber spots them and begins firing. They barely survive, but the rafts are riddled with bullet holes, forcing them to patch what they can and remain afloat. On the 47th day, just as it seems they might be lost forever, a Japanese naval vessel appears on the horizon. Their ordeal at sea is over, but a new nightmare is just beginning. Rescued yet captured, Louis and Phil are hauled onto a Japanese warship, only to be immediately treated as prisoners of war. Weakened and disoriented, they are taken to a camp on Kwajalein Atoll, known ominously as Execution Island. Conditions are horrific. Prisoners are malnourished, beaten, and held in unsanitary cells where disease runs rampant. Louis and Phil endure brutal interrogations by Japanese officers who demand information about American military operations. When Louis refuses to cooperate, he is beaten and subjected to psychological torment. His Olympic fame, once a source of pride, now makes him a target. The guards recognize him, and rather than executing him outright, they decide to use him as propaganda. Eventually, Louis and Phil are transferred to Omori, a more established prisoner of war camp near Tokyo. Here, they encounter Mutsuhiro Watanabe, a ruthless prison guard known as the Bird. Watanabe, sadistic and unpredictable, immediately fixates on Louis, seeing him as a challenge to break. Louis is forced into backbreaking labor, barely surviving on minimal rations. The Bird singles him out, subjecting him to humiliating beatings, forcing other prisoners to strike him, and tormenting him psychologically. Despite the relentless abuse, Louis refuses to let Watanabe crush his spirit. He draws on his past, his days of training, his Olympic perseverance, and his brother's words, "If you can take it, you can make it." The suffering continues, but Louis' will to survive remains unbroken. In 1944, as Japan faces increasing defeats in the war, Louis and other prisoners are relocated to Naoetsu, a remote, harsher labor camp in the mountains. To Louis' horror, Watanabe has also been transferred there, and his reign of terror continues. At Naoetsu, prisoners are subjected to grueling forced labor in extreme conditions, often carrying heavy sacks of coal through deep snow. Malnutrition, sickness, and exhaustion claim many lives, but Louis refuses to give up. One day, Watanabe devises a test designed to break Louis once and for all. He forces Louis to lift a heavy wooden beam above his head and hold it for an indefinite period. If Louis drops it, he will be executed on the spot. The entire camp watches in silence as Louis struggles, his arms trembling under the weight. Watanabe stares, waiting for him to collapse. But Louis does not falter. Despite every wound, every scar, every act of cruelty he has endured, he refuses to give Watanabe the satisfaction of seeing him fall. Minutes turn to an hour. With his last ounce of strength, he glares defiantly at Watanabe. Furious and humiliated, Watanabe storms away. In that moment, Louis has won, not just against Watanabe, but against everything that tried to break him. By 1945, Japan is on the brink of surrender. The camp guards receive word that the war has ended, and they flee, abandoning the prisoners. The exhausted but still standing POWs are soon discovered by Allied forces. Louis and his fellow captives, having endured years of suffering, finally taste freedom. Returning home, Louis is greeted as a war hero, but his battle is far from over. Haunted Haunted by nightmares of Watanabe and the torment he endured, he struggles with PTSD. At night, he relives the horrors of the camp, and in his waking moments, he feels lost in a world that has moved on. But Louis refuses to be defined by his trauma. He finds solace in his faith, eventually dedicating himself to forgiveness. Years later, he returns to Japan to meet his former captors and offer them peace. Watanabe, however, refuses to see him. Still unable to face the man he failed to break, Louis finds closure not in revenge, but in letting go of hatred. His journey of survival, resilience, and redemption is complete.